Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of 108 Stitches Baseball Talk. My name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth, and my co-hosts tonight are working overtime this week. Last night we welcomed Stuart Hack to No Limits, and Stuart Hack was, as JJ would say in good time, dynamite. How about that? Goodness. How about that, Stuart? That was good stuff last night. Welcome back.
Right. Anytime you can get a good times reference in there, it's got to be a good thing.
Oh, yeah, it is. And, of course, I got David Levin, who's called Mr. Versatility. And welcome back to the big show here, David, Mr. Versatility. Good times. There you go. We're going to have a good time tonight, too. So with that said, okay.
Sounds like a good time.
Yeah, so, David, you ready to go out there and talk some baseball?
Yeah.
Before we
play ball.
All right, well, let's play ball.
All right. Okay, he fits right in. Okay.
Sure, it does.
So let's get started. I know Scott and I, we do our pre-show talk, and we talk about things, where we set the tone for what we want to do for the show. But he was talking to me a lot about jock tax and how that applies. Can you go over again what jock tax is and how it is different, maybe for something that somebody wouldn't know, especially when it comes to professional athletes? I know that when I was doing my research, I was talking about what it actually was, and it mentioned Major League Baseball players. So could you explain that a little bit for us?
Sure. So when a Major League Baseball player, when they play in a stadium, so for example, if they are playing at either Yankee Stadium or Citi Field, it could be a St. Louis Cardinal, but they now have performed in the state of New York, and they're subject to New York non-resident income tax for the games or the days that they're spending working in another state. It's the same for any performer as well. So any athlete, they could actually file numerous non-resident state income tax returns based on how many, games or how many days they're spending in a certain state. And, I mentioned this to Scott last night, they've done a study with the NBA. With free agency, you have max contracts, and there was a correlation, athletes going to Miami where there's no state income tax here in Florida, or Dallas or Houston where there's no state income tax in the state of Texas. You think about it, you play half your games at home. That's 41 games that you're playing at home. Then you add in the games in the states that have no income tax, then more than half of your salary is not subject to state income tax. And someone who's going for a max contract will get more of a bang for their buck, if they're playing in a state that doesn't have income tax. Like the example I gave Scott last night, LeBron James had to file a New York tax return for the two games. One game he said he played in Madison Square Garden, and the other game he played in Brooklyn. I think he made about $980,000 for those two games that he played, and had to file a New York non-resident return for that income.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I'd like to do that too, but I don't see that in my future. I have no jump shot, and I can't play defense. Let me ask you this, because I'm going to turn it around a little bit, because this just jumped in my head, Scott. See, this is where I'm thinking.
Okay.
What happens when you're playing baseball in Toronto?
It's a Canadian tax return. It's a Canadian. Right. So what you have a Canadian tax return. You pay taxes to Canada. What happens for your United States tax return? You get a foreign tax credit for taxes that you paid in other countries. So the games that you're playing in Toronto, they're the only ones now since Montreal is no longer an issue. So the games that you play there, you get hit with an income tax, but you do get a credit on your federal return for whatever taxes you paid there.
Does it apply to other sports as well? Because I'm going to throw the London football games in there too.
Yeah, it applies to other sports. It applies to musicians who maybe perform concerts in other countries. It basically any performer or anyone. It doesn't even have to be a performer. If you're working in another state or another country, and I'll use myself as an example. About 25 years ago, the firm I was at was auditing an oil spill in Puerto Rico. So I got sent to Puerto Rico for 5 weeks. So the income that I earned for those 5 weeks was Puerto Rico source income. I had to file a Puerto Rico income tax return for that year, and pay taxes, but I did get it as a credit on my federal return. the next year I wasn't in Puerto Rico, I actually got a notice in Spanish asking why I hadn't filed a return for the following year, and I had to have somebody interpret it for me and help me draft a response.
Wow.
So it doesn't matter what industry you're in. If you're actually working in another state, you're subject to that state's income tax if they have one.
Gotcha.
So let's talk about David Cohn and Alex Rodriguez. Stuart, you said you worked with David Cohn and Alex Rodriguez. How would you like to go ahead and get a piece of his action?
Yeah. No, I had worked. I had done David Cohn's tax return the last season that he played with the Mets, which was 2003. That was the last year of his playing career, and he was just up with the Mets in April, and then he ended up at retiring, or they released him. I don't remember which one, but just the month of April, there were a lot of states that David Cohn participated in that we had to file tax returns for.
And Alex Rodriguez?
That's outstanding. Actually, Scott, when I was looking and doing research, they were talking about how Alex Rodriguez would use the when he was signed with the Rangers for the $252 million, and how they were breaking down the stock tax, and how it would be different because he was playing in different cities from time to time. That's how that came up.
And remember, his home games were in the state of Texas.
Right.
Right. He wasn't paying any state tax for that on that $252 million.
Yeah,
so
basically the Rays players and the Marlins players kind of luck out. It's more money for playing 81 games as opposed to being in New York or Washington.
Right, but then you also have to look at like New York being better for advertising, for endorsements. So there are other things that a player would have to look at, not just an income tax thing. Otherwise, the Florida and Texas teams would, get all the best players year in and year out.
Good point.
I'm not so sure about that, the way they play.
Yeah, but that's interesting, though. That's true. How, Stuart, you bring up the endorsements, which is why at one point or another, that's why everybody wanted to go to L.A. and New York. Now, obviously, with endorsement deals being what they are, for the most part, you can get them anywhere, but how times have changed. So, all right, let's turn this over to baseball. And, David, you go ahead and lead off, since it's a popular term in this sport.
Well, okay, so I'm leading off again. I'm at the top of the order. We now have a season. Like it or not, it's 60 games. We've been watching this tennis match go back and forth. Do you think this is a good thing? Do you think that the shortened seasons plays out to be something that's positive?
Before they decided they were going to have a season, I thought they should just can it. And, you want to make sure that team employees, teams in the front office, people that don't make that much money get paid or get taken care of. But I just didn't see the good of it. Now that they have it, you can make the case it's similar to the second half of the 1981 season after the strike, where they played about 50-something games, and teams that may not have done well in the first half now all of a sudden had a chance to be a playoff team. And I was a big New York Met fan. I am a big New York Met fan, and they were a horrible team in the late 70s, early 80s. And by playing 500 ball the second half of the 1981 season, the commissioner's office in the middle of September, I was thrilled to death, gave them permission to print playoff tickets. So now you're getting interest in other cities, maybe, like a team like Baltimore, though that's really a stretch. They could have a good 40, 45 games stretch, and they're in the middle of things. So it'll give interest in cities that maybe wouldn't have had interest in the last month of the season. So for that, it's a good thing. The labor stuff that went on before they decided on all this, that didn't exactly put baseball in a great light, and especially, with the, next year with another threat of a work stoppage, that could hurt baseball. But it's going to start. Hopefully, they have some plans in place, especially if players start testing positive once the games begin. Because a team can get hit with 5-6 of their really good players, and then what do?
That is my biggest fear of all of this. I'm a purist through and through. I have questions that I want to discuss with you, but I'm a pure baseball fan.
Stuart,
the thought of them playing.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I want to add something, Stuart. In 1981, I believe the Cincinnati Reds had the best record in baseball, but did not get in, and the LA Dodgers ended up winning the World Series. So you want to talk about flaws of that situation during those kinds of a season like that. I
believe the St. Louis Cardinals had the best record in the East overall and didn't get in the postseason.
Right. So, I mean, you think about the Cardinals and the Reds being victimized, and the LA Dodgers got their World Championship. So I wanted to throw that in. So go ahead, David. Continue.
That's fine. I'm worried that we're rushing this. I cover the Marlins for a living, and just like the Orioles, it's a long shot to think that the Marlins can get in the playoffs. But it's 60 games, and you don't know what's going to happen. So I'm hoping that maybe somebody has some Novocaine and they don't realize that they should be losing, and they shock the world and get to 32 wins, and that should guarantee them a playoff berth. But I'm worried that you're right. Everything's going to go great for 20 games. And 3 players are going to get sick. And I mean prominent players. And then somebody else is going to get sick. And then Joe Blow's going to say, well, I'm not playing because people are getting sick and I don't want to risk it. And all of this bickering back and forth in this tennis match, or what you want to call it, a punching match, was all for naught. And the players still got all their prorated salaries.
I guess they figure they have to do something, because if they don't play, they'd be the only major sport totally skipping. The NBA and the NHL got to play about 3/4 of their schedule before they shut down, and they're hoping to resume. It looks like the NFL is going to have some form of a season coming up, maybe even all of it. So baseball is the only major one out of the big 4 that's missing it, that would miss out. And, I guess the feeling is 60 games is better than nothing. So, they put a few rule changes in, the runner on second with nobody outs and extra innings to maybe add some excitement. The universal designated hitter, which they've been talking about forever doing, is now going to come to fruition, at least for this year. So I guess the hope is to make the game a little bit more exciting for these 60 games. Hopefully more teams will be involved in pennant races, whether it's through expanded playoffs or just being in the race after 40 or 50 games. And maybe this gives baseball a jump start in future years to, just garner some interest.
I'm not in favor of the designated hitter. I will tell you that I could talk for hours about it and the reasons why. I'm a purist. I believe the pitcher should be helping his own cause, and I want to see him, grade out. And some of these pitchers can hit the long ball. Are you in favor of the changes that they're making for this year? The runner on second base, the designated hitter. There's talk that maybe if they play double headers, the second game will be 7 innings. That hasn't been voted on yet, but that was something that was brought up. Are you in favor of the changes?
For a 60-game season, I wouldn't say in favor. I'm okay with it.
Okay.
There's certain things. Look, the designated hitter has been around since 1973. It's been in the American League, so it's not necessarily a new thing. I think the concern for a 60-game season is for some of these pitchers to have to worry about hitting as well. It might add to, other injury problems that they potentially can get. So I'm okay with it. I think at some point the designated hitter is going to be universal in the future permanently. I think that's where it's headed towards, for better or for worse. I'm a National League person. I as a child, I used to love it when a pitcher would help their own cause. But, you look at other sports like hockey, for years, you had the tie. Then when you went to sudden death, all the purists said, oh, this is going to ruin the game. And it actually made hockey a little bit more exciting and added a little bit more interest to it. And baseball, it's my favorite sport, but it's gotten a little stale. So I think, if they could do something that jumpstarts it, that would be a good thing. Now, this runner on second to start the extra innings, that I'm not sure. And I'd read this by Scott the other day. What happens if a pitcher through 9 innings has a perfect game? Okay,
right.
His pitch count is low, so they put him out for the 10th inning. They throw a runner on second base. Does he still have a perfect game?
I don't think you can. Can you? Because technically you have a runner on base, right?
But he didn't put it there. They just
right.
They just put a runner there.
Don't worry, David. I didn't have an answer either, so don't feel too bad.
On the radio, we know.
Hey, David, I didn't have an answer, so he's just throwing that your way. By the way, I should point out something, Stuart, that NHL not only had the overtime, but they instituted the shootouts as well, so that made it even more interesting. But no, let's get back to your point there, because the NHL is never afraid to experiment with anything, but... Yeah, he threw that question at me, and I didn't know how to answer it, so it's your turn, Levin, to try to take a stab at that one.
All right, well, how about this? That's my homework for tonight, and I'll look into it.
No. You're not getting off that easy. I want to get your opinion on this one, Levin. No way.
I don't think you can call it a perfect game or a no-hitter.
But he didn't give up a hit.
You probably can call it a no-hitter because if you walk the batter, you still have him on base. If he steals second, he's still on base, but it's still...
But you didn't put him there. You're not getting charged with a walk or a base runner on your pitching record. You're not getting charged with that. They're just placing him there.
Yeah, so what that means is you're going to have to...
I got to do some research on that one. Okay, so he threw a slider and I missed, okay?
No, hey, I missed last night, David. Don't feel too bad.
I don't know the answer either.
I missed last night. But here, you know what's going to end up happening, Stu, Dave? You're going to bring guys like Herb Washington. Remember him from the Oakland A's? You're going to bring him in there.
Designated runner.
He was quick. And maybe, if we're lucky, we'll find Ronaldo Nehemiah out there. And maybe Mark Tupper, the old one, will come out of retirement. Then we can bring these guys because all they got to do is run anyhow. But,
Right.
But Herb Washington
that's more of a National League thing, too. Remember, because the National League always worried about designated runner. I mean, in the 70s, it was very popular where they had one guy who just got on, was on base in late innings, and all he did was run around the bases. So it kind of, it's a throwback type of theory, if you want to call
I remember Herb Washington, he's with the Oakland A's, and in the 1974 World Series, he came on to pinch run, and I think it was Mike Marshall picked him off. And I'm thinking, some designated runner he is.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's localize this for a minute, okay, for Milwaukee Brewers fans, okay? You keep Keon Broxton there. He can't hit his way out with a paper bag, and now he's got a roster spot because of this thing, too. So think about Keon Broxton. All he's got to do is just run the base without even trying to swing a bat. So that'll work out.
There are players on the Marlins roster now that are going to fit that role because they can't, they're slap hitters. Nainier Sierra will make the team as a designated runner. He's white lightning all around the base, lightning around the bases. If he's a 250 hitter, he's lucky. Has no strength, but he has speed. You're going to find specialists now that are going to either be a 1-year wonder or this is going to continue, where they're going to keep they're going to expand the rosters again, and there'll be more specialization.
Well, yeah, we know that. I mean, let's face it. This season's going to be whatever it is. All they're doing is having a 60-game season to save face is really what they're doing. And if COVID-19 works out, then MLB doesn't have a logistical nightmare that Greed stopped it. Now, if COVID-19, then they get that thing in golf called a mulligan. That's really what. Can you imagine
somebody saying, "I'm a pinch. What do you do for a living? I'm a pinch runner in baseball, and I owe it all to this pandemic because now I have a spot on a major league roster." The pandemic, they wouldn't be playing. If it wasn't for the pandemic, they'd be playing 162 games. This never would have come up.
I would just go with the fact, hey, I'm a Major League Baseball player, and that's how I impress people. It doesn't matter how I got there. I'm in the show.
Well, hey, let me point something else out here. Okay, we talked about this bizarre stuff with the. The man on second. What about baseball's come down to the fact now we have combined no-hitters? Who'd have thunk that?
Right, where they've got, 2 or 3 pitchers that pitch the no-hitter?
Yeah, I mean, that devalued the no-hitter big time. Didn't it, Stu?
Didn't the Astros have a no-hitter where they threw 6 pitchers out there?
Yeah, right, they had that too.
I think like 5 pitchers that did it one year. It's beyond me. It's impressive. That's for sure.
Yeah, but now pitchers are being taken out when they have no hitters. That's how much I can't stand the game in some cases. You're taking a guy out with a no hitter, bringing another guy. That devalues that stat anyhow. But combined no hitters, so we're worried about this runner on second thing. At least they know it's a 1-year deal thing because nobody can stomach it. This is what you call the opportunity to experiment. And boy, 2020 is an experimental year if I ever saw it. So go ahead, David.
Okay. why did it take this long? I know that the owners in MLB had their side. The Players Association wanted to stick their chest out, and they had their side. We're bickering back and forth over what is essentially 10 baseball games. While everybody else is getting their act together and the NBA and the NHL are planning playoffs, basically baseball has a black eye from this. Why did this take so long?
I think it's egos on both sides. Past negotiations. No one wants to give, and I think it was a black eye for baseball, like you said, and hopefully the 60 games. There's no stoppage in the middle of the 60 games for any illness or outbreaks, and they get a full season with playoffs and maybe redeem themselves a little bit. Mm-hmm. My feeling, I had said if they would have just skipped this year, I would have been okay with that. And if they would have geared up to come back in 2021 with a full spring training, without this bickering, the fans would have been all excited, a full baseball season coming. They really could have done something with it. But I understand, a lot of it's money, and the owners are freaking out because they're not getting income, and they're trying to figure out ways to do so. And I understand why they want to have some sort of a season, and I'm hopeful that it goes without interruption, and they don't have to shut it down again.
That's all. How well does this? And I have my own answer, so I'm asking you. Mm-hmm. How well do you think this sets up for the smaller market teams or the smaller budget teams? Tigers, the Marlins, the Orioles, teams that have not put hundreds of millions of dollars into their rosters. It's 60 games. It's not a marathon anymore. How well do you think this sets up for everybody across the board?
I think potentially it could work out well for them, but what they have to do is they have to act on it. So if a team like the Marlins or the Tigers gets off to a good 30-40 game start, now I think the trade deadline is now August 31st for this.
I think it is, yes.
And free agents are still going to be free agents who were supposed to be, even if they played a full season. So if there may be good players available August 31st, so maybe a team like the Marlins, they feel they have a shot to get into an expanded playoff, they jump. Mm-hmm. And they grab someone, even if it's a rent-a-player for a month. And that adds interest. Now, the other issue is how many fans are going to be able to go to these games? Now, you want to draw up interest, but if you can't have fans, it takes something away. I read something where the White Sox were hoping to play at 20% capacity this year. As far as bringing people, as far as fans in the ballpark. So that becomes an issue too. And I guess, the television broadcasts that they have, how well they're able to add to some of the excitement, for people because the majority of the people that'll be watching baseball this year will be watching at home. Let's face it, even a lot of people are still going to be nervous to go to a crowded ballpark, and they're just going to watch it at home. So how, the excitement that you have on a telecast. And then if you look at the telecast, you have to add commercials. Will the networks be desperate for some income where they'll just be throwing commercials left and right, more so than they have, even maybe during an inning, throwing in a commercial like between batters? Mm-hmm. So will that hurt a broadcast? I mean, there's so many parts that we're not even aware, and we won't be aware probably till they start playing, as to how this is going to play out. I mean, there's just so many things.
So Stuart,
do you expect sorry, go ahead.
That's okay, Stuart. Obviously, David asked you, what do you think it took so long? But how much do you think this is going to hurt the product on the field, knowing full well that it did take a while for this to get finalized? Do you think it's going to hurt the product on the field?
It's hard to say. It can. Again, if players. There may be players that decide not to even play. That hasn't been decided yet. I think there's a deadline for where, players that might be considered high risk.
Right.
So now if, and I read too, I think Mike Trout's wife is expecting at some point in the very near future. And I don't know, is he going to have to be quarantined from her at any point? And I'm sure he wants to be around for the birth of his child. So there's just so many moving parts with all this. And I think Major League Baseball and even the Players Association, I think they're just hoping for the best. They're going to hope that it just works out. And I hope they have some sort of contingency plans that if for some reason it doesn't work out, well, this is what we can do. I know that they started to play baseball, I think, in Korea.
Right.
And I think I saw did they shut it down for a little bit after they started playing, or
no? I think they've actually been going through. So I'm glad you brought Korea, Stu. So let me ask you this: how much do you think Major League Baseball has learned from the way the Korea baseball organization is going on? I've actually enjoyed the games, and this gives MLB an opportunity to scout a little bit about what they can do when their product actually does get on the field. I'm glad you brought Korea up. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope they are watching. I thought it was cute. They showed the pictures of the stuffed animals that they put in the stands.
Right.
So, and I think that was
actually kind of cool.
And they were piping in some crowd noise, because the players feed off of this, and it becomes a little difficult for a player who's used to the sound of a crowd, all of a sudden playing in silence. That just becomes something that they're not used to. In any sport, you're used to playing in front of a crowd, you're used to a crowd cheering. And, that's going to be even if they pipe it in, I don't know if it's going to be the same. It's just going to be an interesting thing to watch. And I don't, we can try and predict what it's going to turn out to be, but until that first game happens, I don't think anyone's going to know for sure.
Yeah, but don't look for cheerleaders. I got to tell you a funny story, guys. Many years ago, the Detroit Lions used to use high school cheerleaders because they didn't have to pay the real ones, and for the games over at the Silverdome, and all of a sudden the other ones. So, don't get me wrong, it was a good opportunity for those high school cheerleaders at the Pontiac Silverdome to cheer for the Lions. But, again, now we're talking cheerleaders and some different little knickknacks. I want to also bring up another interesting point that Rick Curdy and Mel Farr Jr. made on the Sports Exchange earlier. Let's just say a hypothetical happens, okay, and you get a World Series, but now you've got an NBA final situation where LeBron were to catch COVID-19 and Giannis doesn't. Now all of a sudden you have a team very overmatched because of unforeseen circumstances. What are your both thoughts about something like that, a team getting overmatched because one superstar is there and the other one isn't? This is as far-fetched as it can, but with COVID-19 everything seems to be anyhow. David, what's your thoughts first, and then Stuart can chime in.
Go ahead, David.
But it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier. It's not as far-fetched as you think. Let's say it's the Yankees, and the Yankees are playing the Mets, okay? And, Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton, Glaber, and take whoever else you want. They all four contracted. And those are four major parts of their lineup, and they're missing. They go and they play a series against the Mets, and they get swept, and that affects their playoff status. It's not as far-fetched as you think it is because of the overmatch, lineup. The Marlins aren't going to have a great lineup. They're already going to go against teams that are similarly, better than they are. Losing key players during the year has to be something that Major League Baseball has to be prepared for. I think that this could be an issue in the middle of the season. If they're talking about a return of a stronger outbreak, remember they're talking about it coming back around, and we're not completely prepared for it.
Yeah, I think they're talking about in September or October, which would be when the postseason, would happen.
Right.
Yeah,
you gave the example of LeBron. Think about the NBA Finals last year. Golden State lost Kevin Durant.
Good point.
Right.
And that seemed to just kind of end it for them. So it doesn't necessarily have to be COVID. Although baseball is a little tougher, in the example of the Marlins, because the Marlins don't have many great players, so they might be able, if they lost a few, they can kind of replace and maybe not lose too much in the process. Where the Yankees lose those four players, that's going to really put a dent in them.
Right.
Stuart, I should bring up that service time.
What do you think about that, Scott? Are you in agreement as far as that analogy or that situation?
Yeah, without a doubt. Again, he brings up a good point with Kevin Durant. So, injury or COVID-19, you lose a key player, you're overmatched, but now you have situations due to a virus. So, so yeah, I definitely agree with what Stuart is. Now, we talk about players here, okay? Service time, they're going to get service time. And then, of course, think about the LA Dodgers for a minute. Had they have not played, okay, this season, you end up trading an awful lot of capital for Mookie Betts. At least they're going to get at least 60 games out of Mookie Betts.
They're going to get 60 games out of him, and then he's going to leave.
Well, all right, but 60 games is better than nothing. My goodness, at least you get to see him in the Dodger blue.
I'm saying but you're cheating the fans too.
Right.
I mean, if you're really in that respect, everybody was all excited. The Mookie Betts trade was supposed to be the one that does it.
Right.
They get 60 games out of him, but they don't go to the playoffs, or they go to the playoffs and they fail again in the World Series. Who do they put the blame that on? I'm waiting to find that one out.
I also wonder, do you think any managers will get fired this year? Or everyone gets a pass?
Don Mattingly is still on the hot seat.
Is he really?
It doesn't matter.
Why, do you think he is,
He's
David?
still on the hot seat.
Yeah.
I would think he'd be safe unless they win something like 17-43 and we're out of it at the first week.
I have to tell you, I was so excited when spring training started and they were winning and they were hitting home runs and the pitchers looked like they were, Don Drysdale and Sandy Koufax out there. And then I'm having to remind myself, it's only spring training.
Yeah.
So I've got this idea in my mind that when they come back, they can win 40 games. I don't know why in my head I think that, but I believe it. And I'm sure I'm going to be completely disappointed.
A short schedule, all they have to do, if they're in contention, halfway through, there's interest there. And it gives them, and maybe it gives certain young players, the confidence that they have where hopefully in 2021, which is a full season, it just gives them a jump start for that. Because that's what the Marlins are trying to build. They're trying to build, a team for the future. And any way they can give their young players any sort of confidence, so if they're in a pennant race now where maybe if they played 162 games this year, maybe they win 65, 70 games and are never in it. But if they get in a pennant race now for at least half the season, now these young players now have pennant race experience. And they're going into next year, and maybe it just gives them the confidence to really, improve that team.
Any team this year, all you have to do is win half. And that's the mantra that everybody's going to take at the beginning. All we got to do is win 30 games, and we're in the playoffs because they've expanded everything. So I think that adds a little bit more intrigue to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead, David.
How do you think that this has changed baseball forever? I know that the DH is going to be an issue. I know that there's a possibility there's going to be issues with contract discussion next year. There's going to be a television package that they're going to talk about. Has this really blackened the eye for baseball for the future or just this year?
I think we'll know more next year when the labor agreement is up. If they can come to an agreement relatively quickly and painlessly, they'll be okay for, the amount of time of that agreement. If they battle and there's a threat of a shutdown or a strike or a lockout or whatever you want to call it, that's going to be a huge, huge black eye coming after this year. You have so many people in the country out of work, businesses struggling, and then you have players who are complaining, that they're making, 7 figures, 8 figures, and they're sitting out, they're complaining, they don't want to do this. So that's going to be a huge, huge black eye if they don't come to an agreement, a labor agreement next year.
Okay, and my final question for you, and I'll turn it over to Scott. It's 60 games. Christian Yelich hits .412.
Mm-hmm.
Is it legit? Is there an asterisk by it? If somebody, there could be multiple 400 hitters. Is this a legitimate season? Is he as good as Ted Williams? That's basically it.
I don't think anyone would ever say that, most of us now never saw Ted Williams play in person, and I don't think anyone in their right mind would say that. I think a more legitimate question is, will the team that wins the World Series be considered a legitimate championship team?
Yeah. Scott will understand this too. You know, in 1980, George Brett hit 390. Tony Gwynn has hit 394. These hitters aren't as, I guess, skilled today as they were back then with those kind of hitters. So are there asterisks by anything, or are we just going to, say, okay, this is the season, we're going to move on?
I think they'll just say this is the season, let's just, the 60 games. I'm sure baseball in their mind, they probably hope no one hits 400. And I think I saw an article they had like, I'm trying to remember the last person that hit 400 over a 60 game period. They're starting
Galarraga.
It was Galarraga, okay.
It was Andres Galarraga. Was it Andres? It was Galarraga, yeah. He had
something like that. So if a player like that does it, there's going to be an asterisk because he was so slow. There was no way he was going to. And even I think he ended up hitting 370, which was amazing anyway with his speed. But even with that, a player like that is never going to hit They're never going to get infield hits or anything like that. So there would surely be an asterisk, someone like that. Now, if it's somebody. A Christian Yelich is a solid hitter. DJ LeMahieu,
yeah, he's the one I was thinking.
Those guys, would they have hit 400 over a full season? Probably not. But I guess you give them their due, for what a full season is considered for 2020.
I think that the guy that could possibly challenge it is Bellinger from the Dodgers. For some reason in my head, I think that his skill set, that he's somebody that you got to watch make contact with the ball. He's got to get off to a fast start, but he's somebody that could challenge that.
Yeah.
Believe it or not,
Scott, you're up.
Yeah, I wrote a story on DJ LeMahieu a couple of years ago when I was out in Arizona, and obviously he had Michigan ties, so there's no question about it. If Stuart, David, he was the first one that entered my mind that DJ LeMahieu, I think, would be legitimate. Not that the asterisk wouldn't be there, but again, now you try to narrow down all the cards. And I think he's definitely would be my odds-on favorite. So with that said, Stuart, what about the awards? How valid are these awards? Cy Young Award, MVP, and so forth. We can't forget them either.
I guess they'll still have them. You'll have a list of the MVP and Cy Young Awards, and whoever wins them are going to be there. That's... I guess, 20, 30 years from now, they may say, it was a short year, but I don't think anyone's going to say it wasn't deserved. They'll say, Jacob deGrom won his third straight Cy Young. They're not going to say, well, the third one was only a 60-game season. But I think they'll say 20 years from now he won 3 straight Cy Young Awards.
Okay, I want to go over some of David's questions because he had some pretty interesting ideas, as he always does anyhow. Okay, let's talk about some of the traditional losing teams. I know we went over there. If there are any particular teams that you think could rise from this insanity, because that's exactly what it is anyhow, would you be able to make a prediction, Stuart, on which ones would be at the top of your mind?
I think the Marlins have, a good nucleus of young players. I think they're a team that would, challenge for a playoff spot. I don't think
their pitch is really good.
Yeah.
It's going to be really good.
Yeah, so that's a team that comes to my mind that I think would take advantage of a 60-game season this year.
Any other ones, or you just putting the Marlins top of the list? Give me like 3 or 4.
I don't think Kansas City or Baltimore. I guess anyone can get lucky, but I don't see that. Maybe a team like San Diego, they have some between Machado and Tatis. Some good starters. Maybe they surprise people and get in the playoffs. And also it would be interesting in the National League who takes advantage of the designated hitter.
Right.
And I was reading today that Yoenis Cespedes says he's ready to play.
I saw that too.
And he's not going to play the outfield.
Right. That's true. That's true. So
and had the pitcher hit there, even if he was active, he wouldn't be playing every day. That bat would not be in the lineup every day. And, so that could be something that helps the Mets out.
Okay, let's go back to another one of David's points. Okay, when he asked you about MLB changing forever because of the stoppage. Do you think because they're playing the 60 game that this, they get a mulligan and they're able to save face, knowing full well that you didn't want them to cancel an entire season, where the other ones are already underway? I guess it's about saving face at this particular point, where you're trying to prevent anything as severe as trying to recover from the 1994 strikes.
Or have at least got a season underway.
Right.
I think baseball didn't want to be the one league that didn't play at all.
Right. It would have been a PR nightmare as far as I'm concerned. So, but I think, in fact, now again, do you think the speed of the return lends for issues with safety and mismanagement? I know we talked about that earlier, but let's face the reality. You can't go ahead and high five. Where the sunflower speeds, the spitting, and all the traditional habits you have there. How much is that going to be missed, or is nobody really going to care about it? Because I know I used to love going in dugouts, seeing sunflower seeds all over the place. And then also, since there are no fans, are you going to see players scattered all over with walkie-talkies?
Yeah, you got to be careful too, because someone will scream out to somebody, and everybody hears it. Right. Whereas with the crowd, you can give like a little bit of a hand sign and a scream, and they don't hear it. So there's going to be a lot of different dynamics, and it'll be interesting to watch. I think the first 2 weeks of the season are going to be very interesting to watch, and then we'll see. It's almost like, to compare it to like the XFL.
Right.
So both the first couple of weeks, everyone was interested to see all these new rule changes and see how it would work. And then after that, did it have a life of its own to go on? And it turned out it didn't. So that baseball, people are going to watch the first 2 weeks, and they'll see if it's entertaining, if it's new, it'll have staying power for the rest of the 60 games. If not, it's going to Major League Baseball will take a hit, because the rest of the season, the fans will have no interest whatsoever. They won't like the new rules. People will complain, and that could hurt baseball. So baseball, I think they almost have to come out of the gate really fast, really quick, and just grab everybody's attention.
Yeah, if there was ever a year to do it, I remember when I went to a Florida State League game, Stuart, and I saw the man on second base, and all of a sudden I remember seeing this, but then I forgot that they were experimenting it in the minor leagues. I personally couldn't stand it. So with that said, okay, when we talk about the potential strike after next season, again, the main thing is you got Rob Manfred versus Tony Clark, two strong personalities playing this thing out in the media, and the last thing it needs is a repeat of 1994, knowing full well that baseball's attendance figures are already down. Do you think that these two parties can really make sense out of it, knowing full well that, 1994, and I think you don't have Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire or Cal Ripken to bail you out this time?
No, you don't. Hopefully they learn from their mistakes. I think we have to wait and see how this year plays out. And I think hopefully things will clear up for them, and they'll be able to, come to some sort of meeting of the minds next year and come to some sort of agreement, a labor agreement that both sides can live with.
Now, before they settled on this 60-game schedule, what did you think would have been the right amount of games to play? Obviously, the owners at $640,000 a game were going to lose money. Of course, we have grievances that could have potentially followed. What were you predicting would be the actual game amount outside the 60 where we're at now?
I was hoping 81.
Were you?
I was hoping half the season.
And do you think that perhaps there will be grievances, or how has that been worked out, David? Maybe that that a grievance could take place. I'm not sure. I haven't heard any more about the grievances part.
They're not allowed to file a grievance under the current agreement. That was part of the deal, that the prorated salaries would be honored, and they weren't able to file a grievance with the Players Association on their behalf. I don't know all the logistics to it, but that was what they had to agree to be able to get the monies that they had agreed to in March.
Okay, well, that's interesting. So let's go ahead and have some fun with this thing here, and then we'll revisit it a couple of months later, now that I have our new dynamic trio on right here that we have. So, all right, David, who do you predict will be in the World Series? Everybody's coming out with answers, but let's go ahead. Let's lead off with David Levin.
Oh, boy. Putting me on the spot.
Of course.
Yankees and Dodgers.
What about you, Stu?
I'm going to go. I'm going to go a little different. In the American League, I'm going to go with Minnesota. In the National League, as much as I'd love to see the Mets, I'm going to go with the Nationals. And I'm going to go with the Nationals to repeat. And the reason I'm going with them to repeat, a lot of teams have problems repeating because, their pitchers become tired the next year. They log a lot of innings in the postseason, and then they come out and they just don't have it, and they falter. The Nationals aren't going to have that problem this year. Everyone should be pretty, the Max Scherzers, the Strasburgs, they're going to be fresh. Patrick Corbin. So
think about it.
I could see, even losing Rendon, and I forgot they have a guy to replace him, a young guy that's supposed to be pretty good. So I could see the Nationals, repeating.
Nice.
So what's the over-under of how many Houston Astros get plunked this year, knowing that you only have 60 games versus 162?
Every single game.
The Astros are probably the one team. I won't say that they're happy that there was a pandemic, but this really took a lot of heat off of them.
Now, I remember, that's true. There was a time when the Milwaukee Brewers, I think Christian Yelich and Lorenzo Cain were nursing injuries and had injuries, and there was a chance that they probably could pull out of this. Do you think that when you have players that have injuries, that they may be more apt to go ahead and sit out, not jeopardize 2021 or guys that are on one-year deals where they're going after, see what they're about after free agency?
I would hope not. If you're a fan of the Milwaukee Brewers and your best players aren't playing, that's a black eye.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess I can make one prediction that there won't be any drums being banged here because everybody on the planet will know what it is anyway. So,
Right.
So if we want the most far-fetched prediction, okay, we can say the Miami Marlins and Detroit Tigers, but then what was that song, Don't Fall in Love with a Dreamer?
I don't think that's so far-fetched, buddy. I think that at least from the Marlins, I believe the Marlins are going to make the playoffs. I believe that young staff is going to continue to develop, and I also think that these players don't know what to do yet, so they go out there and play, kind of like that Novocaine thing, and they can get through 60 games and make the playoffs.
So, all right, so let's talk about the 60-game schedule. Okay, they play 10 games in their division, and they have another 20 with teams in their region.
Right.
So I haven't even seen the schedule be released, so I have a feeling, and it's only a feeling, that the Tigers could be playing Milwaukee and the Cubs, and I believe the Pirates and the Reds. So again, they're trying to keep everything within so many miles apart.
But regionally.
Yeah, right. So what are your thoughts about regional scheduling? And do you think this could ultimately lead to realignment down the road?
I mean, I think, you get your rivalries that way. I mean, if you think about it, in the 1970s, when you had the two divisions of 6 teams apiece, so you played each team in your division 18 times, and you played each team out of your division 12 times, and you didn't play anyone in the other league. So there was a chance to develop some really nice rivalries back then. And, it's a way to maybe go back with that. I mean, I realize the main reason they're doing that is to cut down on travel, but if this is a benefit of it, it adds a little bit of interest, maybe it's something they look at going forward to, I think there'll always be interleague play, but maybe you limit it just a little bit, because I know when the Mets and Yankees started doing the interleague play in the 1990s, there was so much interest with that. And I think over the last few years, even though they're in the same city, it just kind of died down a little bit. I don't think you see the games don't really take on, as important as they did. And even in the 90s, even if one of the teams wasn't doing well, it was still a big deal for both teams. They had to beat the other team. And that made it a nice rivalry. But I think after a while, it just got a little bit stale.
Well,
so maybe they go back to what they did in the 70s, where you play more of your teams in your division, in your league, and your World Series becomes a little bit more special.
Right. Yeah, I remember once upon a time the Milwaukee Brewers and the Chicago White Sox were in the same division, but everybody knows the Brewers and the Cubbies are the rival. Since I made you guys go out on the limb, I'm going to go ahead and give you two possibilities. We might have the Mookie Betts Bowl here between the Dodgers and the Red Sox, or the Dodgers and the Yankees. And I still think that the Dodgers will win because they won it in 1981. Why not do it during another interesting season? So, I don't know, we either have the Mookie Betts Bowl or we have the Dodgers and the Yankees. What do you think about those, guys?
It would definitely have some interest.
Yeah, if they have the Dodgers, then please make sure that Vin Scully is calling those games, please. I'm begging you, make sure that Vin Scully is part of this.
Well, if he isn't, Joe Davis.
World Series without him.
If he isn't, Joe Davis is an up and comer. I actually met him out in Southern California. Yeah. Joe's a really nice guy, but no, I think they're in capable hands with Joe Bug. So I don't know, and I don't know what's that song, "Bang the Drum Slowly." Will that be played if the
pretty much
Houston Astros get involved? Bang the drum slowly, even though everybody will know exactly what it is, anyways.
Yeah,
right.
Interesting stuff. So you guys want to add anything more to this intriguing baseball discussion since we started off with the jock tax?
Okay, here's one.
I'm now really... Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So we talked about 400 hitters. How many home runs do you think the home run leaders will have this year?
Oh, that's a good one. All right, hey, listen, Levin, can't have too many curveballs thrown.
30.
Really?
I'm going to say 30.
Really?
Well, and I'll say this. Well, between 25 and 30. It is very easy to come out of the gate and swing a home run. It's not as easy to pitch winning baseball. I believe that the hitters are going to be ahead of the pitchers when everything is said and done. And you're going to see batting averages higher. You're going to see teams collectively hit better. The pitchers need more than these 3 weeks to get back into a rhythm. And I think that's the one thing that's going to be damaging this year is you're not going to see great pitching.
All right, so let me add a little twist to that, Stuart. Okay, good question. And again, I love that because of the fact he brought up that perfect game scenario with a man on second.
Yeah.
And neither of us can answer it on 2 nights. So
I'm going to have to get the homework.
Yeah, I'm sure you will, and you always do. So I predict that if you do get a 30 home run guy, that a Colorado Rocky will get it since you have the high altitude of Forest Field. What do you think, Stu?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would come from somebody there. Somebody in a ballpark like that. That gets 30 games and gets off to a fast start. Sure, and hopefully Charlie Blackmon will be fully recovered, and maybe he's a candidate for that. Yeah,
I mean, listen, let's face the reality. Coors Field and that altitude, I would think for sure. That, of course, Yankee Stadium, I hear, is a hitter-friendly ballpark. Of course, you can't forget Camden Yards. So those are places that are hitter-friendly. But if I were a bet man, okay, I would say that the home run champion comes from Colorado at Coors Field. That's just my gut feeling.
Okay.
I like that.
Well, I mean... Listen, there's nothing wrong with coming off with all these far-fetched ideas. It's our responsibility out here as commentators to entertain everybody, and you can rest assured I think we've done exactly that tonight. You guys agree?
Yes, I think so.
If you're going to take a Colorado Rockies, I'm going to take Nolan Arenado.
Okay.
To have because, I mean, so much has been made about him and his contract lately in trade rumors. I bet you he smacks the crap out of the ball this year.
You bet. Well, okay. Pretty hard to bet against you. And I like Charlie Blackmon myself, but
I like that idea too. But here's another question, and I know we're getting ready to wrap it up. Since Charlie Blackmon came out and said that he, tested positive, what is the protocol now? It hasn't. We haven't officially started spring training, so. Is there I'm going to liken it to a program where the NFL has players who are in a abuse program where they have to go through certain steps. Do players have to go through certain steps before they even begin to practice? And if so, is it going to be a uniform policy for everybody. If you tested positive prior to this, what is being done to not only help the player but protect him from future illness? Because, I mean, it can come back around.
Presumably, I mean, he's being quarantined. He's not around anybody. If it happens during the season, I guess they'll send him. I guess they'll have a place for him to go where he's away from everybody else.
That's what I'm getting to. Yeah.
Yeah, they'll have to separate them. You can't have them even remotely in the area, and it's going to be tough because when a player tests positive, it probably means he's had it for a couple of days where he was around people.
Right. Isn't that the first thing they ask you, though? I've been tested because I have the asthma, and they thought I may have it. I didn't. But the first thing they said to you is, have you been in contact with anybody in the last 14 days? Well, how do you know if you might not know? So
right.
I'm just curious what their guidelines are going to be. I hope.
Well, I mean, I guess if you knew someone, if you had a friend that you were seeing and that ended up testing positive and you saw them, you would answer that question, yes, I was around somebody.
Right, but I mean, there are cases where you just don't know.
Right. Then you have to kind of look out and see if you have any symptoms, and if you do, then you get tested and see what the results show.
All right, let me add this, okay? Obviously, you know that Texas is a high-risk state in Florida, and this is a disturbing number, but I have no choice to bring it up. But as of Wednesday night, 13,865 people in Florida tested positive and were hospitalized due to COVID-19. Now, when I bring that number up, okay, not only we talk about the teams that are playing here, but what about the teams traveling here? Do you think this season even gets very far, knowing full well that this disease or virus could spread the way that it does? Are we going to even see the end of this thing to begin with? Florida's, that's an alarming number. 13,000, we're talking nearly 14,000, and we don't even know what today's numbers are going to bring yet.
No.
Yeah. I think Major League Baseball is probably hoping that by the time they start the season, at least in the states like Florida, that the numbers will start to drop. Whether that'll happen or not, I don't know. And if it doesn't happen, hopefully they have a plan in place. I know now New York is requiring people coming from Florida and other states down here to quarantine for 14 days before they can, get let out with the general public. Although they are not. I think I saw baseball players would be exempt from that. Obviously, if they're traveling, if someone's traveling from Florida to play, in Citi Field or Yankee Stadium, they're not going to quarantine for 14 games once they get there. That's not realistic. But for the average person, you or I think they would, unless we were covering the game, they would quarantine us.
They also have that in Canada. I believe Toronto, where it's a 14-day. Isn't it a 14-day quarantine if you come across?
I think so. I know at some point Canada had pretty much said they had shut it down. I don't know from which state, but I know there's an issue even now with the Blue Jays where they're talking about the Blue Jays maybe playing someplace else.
Well, the only someplace else that I think that would make sense, guys, would be Buffalo.
Yeah.
Buffalo, think about it.
I'm sure there's a fan base there. They're not too far.
Well, right, 45 minutes away. Those separates those
September,
two.
it's going to be freezing there.
What's that?
Come September, it will be freezing there.
Well, maybe so, but still, I mean, what's the difference? It freezes in Minneapolis, so Buffalo is up there too. So, again, you're talking a 45-minute to an hour drive from Buffalo to Toronto. Take it from somebody that knows. I've taken it. Huh?
Yeah, Minneapolis has a dome stadium.
Well,
dome stadium. That's the difference.
They did, but they don't now. They did. The Metrodome. I got news for you. I could tell you some horror stories about my knees on the Metrodome turf, and you wouldn't want to know them. But no, I mean, think about it. I mean, now Minneapolis has an outdoor field with Target Field, so it gets cold up there too. But with all due respect, I think Buffalo would be logical if the Blue Jays need an alternative. They really do. I mean, we don't know what the international imbalance will be. And I think the nicest part about this broadcast is we should call it the broadcast of hypotheticals, because that's all this is. Baseball's list of hypotheticals.
Change the name to 108 hypotheticals.
You know what? Kind of think about it. Maybe I will. 108 hypotheticals. Actually, I like that. That's a good. See, you know, we do go ahead and take suggestions for names.
Don't tease him or tempt him to do that, please.
Oh, I will now. 108 hypotheticals. No, I actually think that's good. We needed something, and Stuart nailed it there. We started off with Jock Dance, now 108 hypotheticals. Good. How about that? Hey, come on, guys. There's no reason why we can't have any creative.
That really was brilliant. That was brilliant.
Thank you.
Hey, listen, Levin, you and I...
Even a blind squirrel finds an acorn.
Well, that's true. How many
I'm glad you went with that, okay?
No, I like the 108 hypotheticals because already Stuart Hack threw a curveball that neither of us could hit last night, and I get nailed, and now it's your turn, Levin, to get nailed for the perfect game one.
Of course.
That will be, if anybody learns anything about any of these two shows, No Limits in this one, is there going to be a perfect game lost here because of the runner on second base? Folks, at least remember that one.
I might be able, but I really do believe that I might be able to get an answer for you for that.
Well, I believe you will.
That'd be great. I'd really like to know.
Well, you know what?
No, I will work on that.
Well, you know what? We'll book another date for all three of us, and then David's got homework to do. Then again, he always does anyways. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, he's not nice to me. Anyway.
Well, whatever. David, you're like a crazy brother to me, so what would you expect? And Stuart, well, we're just good old buds, man. So, but Levin's good stuff, man. You know, we've lived through the Jacksonville Jaguar Wars, for crying out loud. We've seen a lot of bad football. We still walk away humbled by the whole thing. So, with that said,
I don't know if that's humble. I don't know if that's humbling. I think that's trying to hide tears.
Well, I'm trying to be nice about it, David. Hey, I've had to deal with the Detroit Lions for a lot of years, and you got the Jacksonville Jaguars, and all I can tell you is what little my math is. 2 of the 4 teams, 50%, haven't made the Super Bowl, and that's as far as my math goes with this whole process. So, with that said, you're listening to 108 Stitches Baseball Talk, but the title will be 108 Hypotheticals, now that Stuart brought it up. That's a dandy. Okay, so with that said, either you guys have any other final closing thoughts?
I guess play ball.
Yeah. This has been a lot of fun.
Well, you know what? 108 hypotheticals, play ball. How about that? Or maybe not to play ball. We don't know. I'll just say 108 hypotheticals because, after all, got to keep it simple, stupid, if I'm even capable of that, although I'm trying. So with that said, sir, why don't you let everybody know how they can go ahead and reach you. And you can also talk about your tax business, anything you want to say, Stuart, all right?
Yeah, so in my other life, I have a tax and accounting firm in Wellington, Florida. You could reach me at 561-214-6171 or on my website, www.hacktaxandaccounting.com.
Okay.
All right.
David, go ahead.
Okay, I write for Fansided.com. I cover the Miami Marlins on MarlinMania.com. I can also be found covering the Jacksonville Jaguars at BlackandTeal.com. I am the host here with 108 Stitches, as long as we keep the name the way it is. And I can be found on Twitter at DFAM719907.
All right, and as for myself, you can find us at Twitter at Tribune South, Facebook, like the page, South Florida Tribune, Instagram, South Florida Tribune. I have a YouTube channel as well, South Florida Tribune. And you know what, folks? That's a 3 of a kind, otherwise in hockey terms called a hat trick, okay? Website, www.southfloridatribune.com. You can go ahead and email us at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. And LinkedIn, Scott Morganroth. You are listening to 108 Stitches Baseball Talk on WSAN Network. And you can also find this broadcast and the other ones on southfloridatribune.com or wherever you get your podcasts. So, on behalf of David Levin and Stuart Hack, my name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth. Hoping you had a great, entertaining broadcast, because we certainly worked hard to do it on 108 hypotheticals, okay? And go ahead. And Stuart Hack is more than welcome to contribute any names that he wants to, because he really nailed. He got a bullseye on that one. But meanwhile, Stuart, glad to have you on the broadcast the last 2 nights, and we're definitely looking for another opportunity with David and I to do it again on this very program. So, meanwhile, folks,
that would be great. I'd love to.
But meanwhile, folks, I have to emphasize this because it's so important. COVID-19 is getting worse. I feel the second wave coming in, so please be safe. Wear the mask. Don't take any chances. This virus is too dangerous. It's not worth it. I just read out the numbers in Florida. Can you imagine what they're like globally as well as the United States? Take it seriously. You don't want to be on the wrong end of this disease. Virus as so many people have. So meanwhile, guys, you did a phenomenal job tonight, and we're looking to do better the next time. All three of us are reunited, and it feels so good. And that's the end of my singing for the night, because I don't want to break the old memory next class. So all right, so meanwhile, good night, everybody, from 108 Stitches Baseball Talk.